Welcome to the Planet B podcast, where truth, transformation, and faith converge. Join us as we flip the script on ecological despair, guided by Dr. Sailesh Rao's vision for a compassionate, rewilded vegan world. Let's begin the journey to the greatest transformation in human history.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the Planet B podcast. Today, we'll take an in-depth look at the Quaternary Ice Age. Dr. Rao, thank you so much for being with us again.
My pleasure. Thank you for doing this in-depth analysis of the book.
It's so fun. It's so fun. So now, Dr. Rao, we're going all the way back into a beautiful origin story of humanity. So, Dr. Rao, where should we begin? We have to begin at the beginning.
Yeah. 500,000 years ago, we learned how to start fires. So we were literally born during the Quaternary Ice Age as a species. And the Quaternary Ice Age is the last 3 million years, where the Earth has been going through glaciation and warm periods between glaciation. And it's we have never seen that in the fossil record, nothing like this, where it goes in and out, in and out, in and out. The temperature goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And the difference between the high temperature range and the low temperature is about 6 to 8 degrees Celsius. Okay, and the CO2 levels have been going up and down between 180 parts per million and 300 parts per million. So the Earth has been swinging between these two states. And during that time, she spawned us as a species. Okay?
Wow.
And gave us control of fire 500,000 years ago. And then 50,000 years ago, she gave us partnership with wolves, who became our dogs. And this is amazing because the wolves have much keener sense of smell, much keener sense of hearing, much keener sense of sight than we do. So they became our, extra eyes and extra ears and extra nose that allowed us to thrive. Because without them, we couldn't have migrated from Africa to every part of the world and still be alive, right? You would have been eaten by the predators who were there in the other areas.
Right.
Because we don't hear too well, we don't see too well, we don't smell too well, we don't run too well, we don't even climb trees too well. We need help.
That's true.
And they helped us. And see, I imagine our ancestors walking across all these ice bridges to go from continent to continent, or getting on boats and rowing. What were they doing all that for? They were looking for a better world for their children and grandchildren, better world to grow in, right? And this was during an ice age. Now again, why did they leave Africa? It was so amazing, right? Why would you leave Africa? Something made them get up and go. We don't know what that is. Again, we see these simultaneously people starting agriculture everywhere. And this is that non-local phenomena that we have observed in the record, where suddenly everybody gets the same idea. How did they all get the same idea? And I say there is something magical in nature that allows us, that downloads into us, saying, here is a new idea, go figure this out. So we walked all over the place. Okay, we migrated. We were one family in Africa. I think of us as, we were all Africans at one point. And we migrated to every part of the world. And then we started agriculture everywhere in the current warm period that started about 20,000 years ago. It started coming out of the glaciation, and about 12,000 years ago it went above the glaciation level. So meaning the earth thawed, the North America thawed, and the Great Lakes were formed, and Northern Europe thawed. The forests came back. And that's when we started agriculture almost everywhere. And by starting agriculture everywhere, we stabilized the climate. We prevented the Earth from going back to another glaciation in the current Quaternary Ice Age. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the temperature of the Earth And if I were to project it out into the future, it goes up and down, up and down, up and down for the last 3 million years. And then 10,000 years, it stabilizes. And then it's going to stay there forever. Okay? And that reminds me of my internet connectivity chips. That's what they all do. They go between, they're searching for the right frequency. And then once they find the right frequency, which is the frequency of the other guy, right? There are two chips talking to each other. They have slightly different frequencies when they start with. And they alternate between the bounds. So we know that the frequency cannot go between these two ranges, cannot go outside this. And they go up and down, and then eventually they stabilize. So when I saw the temperature record from the ice core, it reminded me of my internet connectivity work, where the object was to stabilize the frequency. The same thing was happening here, is stabilizing the temperature.
So it's very fascinating to see all those things that have gone into this, getting to this moment.
Yeah. In the internet work, we were talking about locking. So locking the master and the slave, that's the kind of language we were using there. There's a master frequency, which means that chip says, my frequency is what you need to pick up. It's not my job to pick up yours. You pick up mine. So it keeps sending data at the same frequency. And the other side is trying to lock to this master. And once it locks, then both of them will have the same frequency and then they can communicate. That's how we did the design. And here we are locking onto nature. And we have to lock onto nature and stabilize and know who we are, and create a civilization that's in alignment with nature. And once we do that, everything stabilizes in the Quaternary Ice Age. And the Ice Age is literally over. So our species is now able to get the Earth out of an Ice Age and stabilize the temperature for the foreseeable future. And Jim Hansen actually said this. He said, the Earth will never go back to glaciation as long as humans are around. He said that once, and I said, that's it, that's our role. The Earth will never go back to glaciation as long as we are around, as long as we are thriving on this planet. Because why would we let a mile of ice grow on top of Chicago?
Won't happen.
It won't happen, right? We are going to figure out how to stabilize it and maintain it. And then, we'll be in alignment with nature. It's like we are tuned to nature now.
In this chapter, you talk about, our thumbs. Why are our thumbs so important, do you believe, as humans?
Yeah, the opposable thumbs allow us to manipulate materials. It allows us to develop technologies. Other creatures are not able to manipulate materials as well as we do. So it's like the outer world, right? We can manipulate and create tools better than anyone else. And we needed to do that initially just to protect ourselves. So imagine that, she gave us opposable thumbs, and then she took away our sense of smell, our sense of hearing, sense of sight, or basically we got self-selected. Because we know from the fossil record that we were down to a few hundred of us at one point in time. About 70 to 80,000 years ago, there were just a few hundred human beings. So that's what the genetic analysis is telling us. All 8 billion of us came from those few hundred, from 70 to 80,000 years ago. So those few hundred human beings, had very poor sense of smell, very poor sense of hearing, very poor sense of sight. And you say, how come they are the ones who survived and not the ones who had better sense of smell? Or maybe the others had even worse. I don't know. Okay, but because we have this poor sense of smell and sight and hearing, and we don't run too fast, we don't climb trees too well, we had to build weapons to protect ourselves. And we could do that with our opposable thumbs. We had to create sharp objects out of blunt objects. So all those weapons that we created, that's the beginning of technology. So technology to me is an outgrowth of defense mechanisms that humans had. And now that technology has to be deployed to stabilize the life support systems of the Earth. And we have all the technology we need now to do that. We have all the sensors and the temperature sensors, all the sensors for gases in the atmosphere, So we know we have all the things that we need in order to understand the environment that we are in. And we have to then figure out how to deploy the technology to stabilize it and maintain it. Maintain it on behalf of all life. Right? And that will end the Quaternary Ice Age. It's only if humans disappear that there is a potential that the Earth could go back to another ice age again, and another glaciation again. There's a potential. I don't know if it will happen or not. Okay, it's possible that the Earth may become Venus if humans disappear. So between those two, we have this midpoint, mid place where humans are around and we are stabilizing the climate and we're maintaining it. And that's ideal for all life if we did that.
It's really fascinating because Mother Nature, over could be millions of years, got us to this point by us spreading out, by the animals spreading out to where we are all over the earth, to then get us to that stable state. Like it's almost like billions of years have gone into where we are currently to go onto this planet B.
Correct, yeah. I imagine the Earth is figuring it out, saying, what do I need to do to stabilize this? Saying, okay, this particular species. Yeah. I even imagine, whose Earth? I think of the Earth as other life forms, right? Meaning, if you were to externalize humans and separate them out from Earth, even though I say we are a part of Earth, we've always been a part of Earth. The intelligence on the other side is really all the animals and the trees. And so they are figuring out how to use this species to stabilize the climate, right? So I'm even thinking of, working with a friend of mine to write a story like that, They are figuring out how to use this species to, to stabilize it. You think you're the boss? So anytime you think you're the boss, there's someone over you, right?
Yes. Besides the humans spreading out to get to this point, what are some of the other things that have happened to get to this potential opportunity for a stable state?
Humans migrating, and then the animals helping us, like the wolves becoming dogs. And I think cats are basically, they're just coming along for the ride. Whereas the dogs actively help us by they bark when they tell you when something is happening near you. They warn you about danger and so on. And the other animals, they helped us with agriculture to begin with. Right? So all the domesticated animals that we used. We think that we control them and we use them. No, they helped us. I look at it the other way. The animals are in charge. If you look at it as animals are in charge, they're helping us to get food so we can heat up the planet. And animal agriculture, as I say, is the leading cause of climate change, right? So we'll go into that later. So my analysis is showing that animals have been doing a lot of this co-work with us. And now they're trying to wake us up, saying, you don't have to be like a zombie, and keep going in the same direction, heating up the planet more and more and more. You can wake up, understand your role, and realize that to stabilize the climate, you have to start being kind to all life. You have to start being kind to all animals. You have to basically bring back the wild animals. This was a temporary phase where we killed wild animals off and we created this domestic animal growth. Right? So it's like a growth of a few species. We just grew them like crazy. And by just not growing them anymore, not bringing them into this world, to live a life of suffering really, right? Why would you do that? And returning them back to the wild state that they were in, that will allow us to stabilize the climate and to maintain that. That's what the science is telling us too. To me, it's always been mutual work that we've been doing with the animals. So they are co-conspirators in this stability project. Okay, so you have to acknowledge their role, thank them for it, and say, now we know how to maintain it, so you don't have to suffer anymore. You can go back to your wild state. Right? So the dogs can become wolves again. You know, so bring back the wolf, and live in harmony with all of life.
That's beautiful. And it's interesting too, because there's so many videos and so much content coming out about the animals are clearly showing us to be more compassionate. I feel like at this time more than ever.
I have a couple of stories I can tell you, which is not there
Please
in the
do.
book, I think. Yeah. Like the story of the Akashinga in Zimbabwe, where Damien Maunder observed that when you have men as the anti-poaching squad, the rhinos attack the men. But when you have women as the anti-poaching squad, the rhinos never hurt the women. Because the rhinos know the women have never hurt them.
Wow.
So you can live in harmony with nature, with the wild animals, if you don't go around hurting them. And why were we hurting them before? Because we were scared of them.
Yeah.
But now we have the technology to know exactly where they are. Right? If Google can track 8 billion human beings, we have the technology to track 100,000 tigers, or few 100,000 wolves, or whatever it is, a few million wolves. We can track them. We know exactly where they are, and we can avoid them. And we can make sure that they have their food, and they're living in a thriving environment, and we can stay safe without having to go around killing them. That's a way of staying safe. So we can build these systems, put them in place that allow us to thrive along with the wild animals without having to do lethal conservation.
Right.
Right? So there is a whole book on compassionate conservation, which explains how we can do that.
In this chapter, you state that life is once again seeking to increase in complexity in order to overcome the challenges. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, as the challenge is at the inner edge of the habitable zone, how do you thrive? Okay, how does life thrive? Over the last 3 million years, life has been going in and out of this thriving state. It thrives for a little bit, and then it goes into an ice age where most of things are dead, right? You're all frozen. And imagine that, right? So if the temperature goes down by 8 degrees Celsius from where it is today, species try to migrate. When they migrate, they compete with each other. So they kill each other off. There's a lot of suffering that happens every time you go from an interglacial period to a glaciation. There's a lot of suffering. So we've gone through that suffering for hundreds of times, right, over the last 3 million years. And now Earth is saying, let's figure out a way in which you don't have to go through that anymore. So there's this temporary suffering that happened over the last 10,000 years, where animals were enslaved, humans were enslaved. We all went through this tremendous suffering. But in the process, we have built this technology that will allow us to stabilize the climate and reduce the suffering going forward for a long, long time. So I say life fundamentally tries to find a state in which suffering is minimized. All of life, when you look at it, that's the way it works. And to do that, it had to increase in complexity. And that complexity is what we brought with technology. So I'm trying to tell a story in which we belong exactly as we are. There is nothing wrong. There is no one to shame, no one to blame. We are who we are. And all life, everything accept it as is. And let's move forward, knowing that you belong, right? Let's move forward to create a thriving planet.
That's beautiful. And the next episode is how did we heat the climate? So we'll check that out on the next one. Thank you all so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
This has been a podcast from Planet B, where tradition incorporated the compassion upgrade. If you haven't moved here yet, we thank you for visiting.